Hello, Dice Towerers. Max here, and welcome to the fifth episode of Great Games for Amazing Children. This one's a little bit different. It's a conversation with Jason Perez. Some of you will know Jason as the host of Every Night is Game Night, the podcast, but he's also a psychotherapist. His job title is a licensed clinical social worker, but he works a lot in psychotherapy around mental health. And so I was interested in talking to him about trust and about the magic circle of gaming and about how, as a therapist or as a parent, you're not an architect but a gardener. So that's a little teaser of this conversation. It's a bit longer than most of the videos that I've been putting up, but just see how you like it. Just let us know. One technical note I did find is the first time I've tried to put audio together with a Skype recording, and it just looks like it's very, very difficult to sync up. Basically, I found it very hard. I'm sure that one of you will be able to tell me the trick that I've missed. Please feel free to do so. And I'll see you at the other end of the video. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, great. Jason, thank you for joining me.
Hey.
What is it? Hello, hello. What is it that you do? As the Queen usually asks people, what is it that you do?
So I am a psychotherapist. I work with children and families. So they come into my office, or maybe even I'll go over to their domicile, so to speak. Now I have to use like these big words because you said the Queen. So I'm all nervous. So I'll do a home-based thing where we work on all sorts of issues. We work on depression and anxiety. If the kid is, has a little bit of learning disorder, or if there's any kind of break within the family structure, I come in and see what I can do to fix that up.
So what you've said there is a break in the family structure, and often those are quite traumatic. So what's the relationship, do you think, between the symptoms of anxiety, which is something that's experienced by the child, and trauma? Is it the same process? Is it an overlap? What goes on there?
Okay, so I come from a systems background, so I'm always looking in terms of relationships, right? So trauma is one factor that can rupture a relationship. So like trauma isn't a problem. Like, trauma is basically something that happens, and how the person receives the trauma is going to be the big thing. So if the person receives a trauma and they can maintain relationships, then we work with it that way. But it's the impact on their family relationship, and I find that the further the relationship is, the more anxiety is a problem. It's almost like that's the one-to-one relationship. So like the further away a child is from their parental units or from people, from loved ones, that's where the anxiety comes in. And if trauma is one of those causative factors, then we'll treat the trauma.
And so we're obviously going to be on a board game channel, so we need to talk about board games at some point.
Absolutely.
What is the role of, let's talk about first of all play. What's the role of play generally in bridging those gaps, in getting people back together in that way?
So how do you fix relationships? How do you fix relationships is you create kind of momentary pathways where the relationships are safe, and then you allow the healing to happen so that, that the person, whatever it is, let's say it's the child that's having a traumatic experience, they have like little pathways of safe relationship, and play is definitely one of those pathways. And then they could start the process of healing their overall relationship. So it's kind of like, it's not like a pill, here, have a board game, or have a, things get better. It just creates the situation for healing. Absolutely. How about you? Have you used play in a relationship? I certainly have. I've used a lot of play.
I think I've used play quite a lot in assessment. I'm quite playful in the way I assess children. I'm not a therapist. I'm an assessor, and I do some medication work. But I've used play with my relationships with my children a ton, of course, and with other people. But professionally, it's mainly just how the child responds to that experience of play is quite important assessment-wise.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we use, I use play for change. So I'll play one game to figure out where I'm at, and then come back to the assignment or change the assignment. The rules are not hard and fast to a game. So if a kid isn't engaging with a game with the rules as written, so to speak, then you can always adjust that stuff to kind of help the kid build one way or the other. So I'll use Page.
Hey, I love Rampage.
I think it's known now as Terror Maple City. This is something that ran into a little bit of copyright thing, but this is, to me, this is tools. This is a game, but it's also tools. So there's rules as written in the game, but there are some kids, because of, I actually use when it comes to attention deficit disorder, I'll use this. But it also works for anxiety because you can get people excited, and you can get them processing their emotions that way. So not a lot of people engage with the rules as written. So what I'm going to do is I'll adjust the rules down, or, depending on, or, cut the game short, or whatever it is, in order to, whatever will allow the kid to create that positive relationship, which is where the healing happens.
Yeah. And so while you've been talking about that kind of safe pathways and so forth, I've been thinking about this concept of the magic circle of a game. Is that something that you think is important in your...
It's absolutely important. I mean, in psychotherapy, we call it the holding environment. Or there's a lot of different ways to say it, but like that is absolutely important, because what happens is, in an anxiety situation, the relationship is ruptured, so you have to create those pockets, those almost like points of light, right, of perfectly positive relationship. And the child suspends their normal processing. It's weird how it happens. You could probably say a little bit more about that, but like how the brain is plastic enough to suspend the normal way it works, enter into something that is more healing and more like kind of life affirming, and then when they come back, hopefully there's an echo of it, and it kind of allows them to, change some things about how they're normally relating. So I mean, I'm a huge fan of the magic circle. In fact, I'll make that thing as fun as possible. I mean, my magic circle is Disneyland, for crying out loud.
Okay. And I think that's right. You're going to make it as accommodating for the child as possible, haven't you? I mean, I think what's really interesting is this idea of, for me, is the idea of internal working models that the child has and assumptions that they make about any interaction. And it's actually, you're right, it's almost a break from those assumptions. So usually interactions with an adult, for instance, are confrontational, or there's a kind of power dynamic. But actually, for half an hour, let's subvert that power dynamic and make it equal and make it different. And there's this suddenly there's this person in front of you who kind of looks different. And that makes it sound much more dramatic than it is. But I think there's an element of that going on. Often, I find that parents are trying to get children to engage in play, and the children are sabotaging the game, or kind of being really badly behaved during the game. And sometimes I think it's useful to reframe that as an anxiety or trauma problem. How do you do that in your work?
So so what we're talking about is a kid that is not engaging in your game. So they're not engaging in your game. So like a lot of people will approach the problem as, okay, the problem is they're not engaging in the game. The way I see it is, that the key thing is your game. Like, you've chosen the game for them. So I mean, I get it that a lot of people have difficulty with getting their children to kind of choose something. Like, okay, go to my wall. I have a whole wall over here, and choose something. So I mean, this is where I have, like, we're talking about board games, but this is bigger. Like, all kids want to play. All kids want to play. And you have to, if someone has an anxiety or an attachment problem, it narrows the scope of what they're willing to play, but it doesn't get rid of it. So you have to be a little bit more attentive to kind of hit that. It's basically like hitting a smaller bullseye. So you have to be a little bit more attentive to what will hit that smaller bullseye. So if they're not engaging in, this, that, or the other game, then maybe we could, either find something different, find something that is a little bit less structured. So maybe the issue is that there's a little bit too much structure in the game that you're trying to play. I try to play, there's a Hobbit game called First Orchard that I play with my small kid. And, we have to change the rules of that. There's even a little tiny game like that. We have to change up the rules and make it more about a tactile experience. And maybe that's the way you engage to play that way. So I guess as an overall thing, I like the issue. I like the way of talking about it as reframing. As an overall issue, we definitely want to get to all kids want to play. But baseline, every single kid wants to play. What do they want to play? That's
just thinking of our audience and who sort of say, oh yeah, what game should I try? Now, obviously, there's caveats to that, because you've said it isn't necessarily your game. You have to let the child have some input, have some agency themselves. But that said, are there some particular games, maybe ones that are easy to get hold of, that you find are particularly good for drawing children into this magic circle we've been talking about? Let's say you've got a 5-year-old, first of all, 5 or 6.
Well, for 5 or 6, you're going to want to increase the toy factor. You're going to want to give them a little bit of pop in their gaming experience. Tom actually released the top 10 children's games, and his number 1 game was Animal Upon Animal. That is about as good a game as you're possibly going to get. Every kid loves animals. I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you've had the most traumatic experiences. You grew up in an orphanage. You give that child a dinosaur doll, and they go in and start playing with it. So, I mean... And there's a lot of different variations of that. I love taking the different sets, because there's so many sets at this point, and just letting the kid, like play with it, letting the kid stack them with it, letting the kid invent rules with it. They may even like a little animal society with it. So like Animal Upon Animal is a great one. I mean, there's so many Hobbit games that are so good. For the really young kids, I'm a big fan of like things that, like games that have these very safe, realistic kind of components. So I'm a big fan of Virtual Orchard as well, at least for the younger kids, because it has fruit. I mean, who doesn't know fruit? The
wooden components, which is sort of, I don't know. It's just comforting to touch that sort of thing.
Bright. I mean, they're bright. There's no shadows. There's no like hint of danger in these games. Like, like all the animals, obviously in the real life, they're a little bit dangerous, but in the little wooden pieces, they're all cute and amazing.
No, that's right. So what about a slightly older child? But let's say an 8-year-old or 8 or 9.
They're their own person. So kind of leaning into the different interests that they have. So, at that point, they're school age. So Ice Cool is excellent. Ice Cool, it's another game that is basically you lay it out, and it doesn't have to be the game that it is. I think that's kind of the thing that I like to emphasize when it comes to opening the world of games up to kids. It doesn't have to be the rules as written. If you're going to be locked into that, then that's a huge problem, because they might not want to play the game that you want to play. It might actually reinforce anxiety and attachment, because now they're feeling like, oh no, I don't want to live up to the rules that the elder has set for me. You got to kind of down-tune this stuff. So I'll lay out Ice Cool, and what I love about Ice Cool is that the board game, the actual physical component itself lays a story. They can look in the classroom, they can look in the cafeteria and everything. It's like, and they can kind of impute themselves. I actually encourage that. It's like, okay, do you remember when you were in this room and Mrs. So-and-so came in and you were trying to run away and blah, blah, blah. So that's a really awesome one. And it has I love tactile. Anything that has tactile pieces is wonderful. Like when it comes to anxiety treatment for adults, like people laugh at fidget toys, but gosh darn it, they work. The spinners and the fidget cubes and everything, tactile. Anxiety is a mental event, so you have to get people involved in their physical in order to cancel out that mental. It works for children too. So if you have, I recommend a lot of games that have physical components. Those are just 2, and Rampage and a couple of others.
I think you said something really important, which is the physical cancelling out the mental. If you've got someone who's struggling mentally, if they can do something physical, and that's one reason why exercise is so good, if you can actually get to do exercise. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. So let's talk about the older child, because often play has kind of diminished to, well, I would say diminished to sort of just endless video games at that point, and often can get a bit solitary. So the older child, maybe 10, 11, who's a bit alienated perhaps from everything, how do we draw them back in? When
it comes to the older child, this is going to be more and more dependent on personality. Like the personality kind of goes up and down the ages. Don't throw a Candyland game to somebody who likes to jump around and everything. I mean, you have to kind of tune it to the child. When it comes to the older child, what I find is that don't be afraid to kind of skimp on the challenge if you want to kind of don't dumb it down for them. Like obviously with a younger child, you have to you're gonna have to futz rules. But I've even found, I'm actually doing this in sessions right now. I'm playing Magic the Gathering with with a kid, and 10 years old is, or whatever, 8 to 10, they could take that. Or Munchkin, we did like, I have a Munchkin, I have all my Munchkin sets. Yes, I know. Stop. There are people who are like, Munchkin, you have that? No, I have Super Munchkin, Munchkin Impossible, and all that stuff. And we actually had a kid who, and there's a lot of text on the cards. So it actually has the cool combination of text and picture. So like it'll have the text, and then the picture will help them read it. So their minds are like, just talking about getting them out of their frames, their kind of pathways. So they have these, what do you call it, the inner working world or something like that, like the inner assumptions. When you throw a heavy mental load like that, so like a Smash Up or a Magic the Gathering, where it's text and pictures, they can kind of enter that a little bit. The trick is kind of engaging them, so you have to be a little bit of a salesman when it comes to that respect. But once they're there, there's enough on those cards to take them out of whatever they're doing. And then when they get into the combos, when they go like, boom, 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 now you get into the point.
Yeah,
of like,
I think that's absolutely right. Smash Up's a great one. I think I want to bring that to the fore, because it's easy to get hold of. A starter set's not expensive, particularly if you've got to play 2-player. And you have got, you just got this really cool things you can be. So you get to be cool things, and you get to smash stuff up. And that is a great combo. I think that's a really good choice.
Right. Like, superhero fantasies are huge when it comes to that age. So if you can really replicate that in a way that's kind of has it's mentally challenging and mentally rewarding at the same time, which is why I'm a huge fan of card games and therapy at that age. So you can really help somebody kind of bring themselves out. Because what happens when it comes to the older children is that the anxiety takes a kind of self-confidence edge. So like, as opposed to a kid who doesn't have a real sense of self, who's like real young and they're just anxious about the world. When it comes to that older kid, now they're internalizing. Now they're saying, okay, I'm anxious because I'm not good enough. Or, well, they're not saying it, but that's like the hidden assumption that we as professionals have to tease out. So when you can bring them a game that helps them feel a little bit clever, mechanically, as well as give them the visual of being like this awesome, character or whatever it is, that's something that can really, really like make an impact. If they, obviously you have to be a good salesman, you have to, really get them to it. But I have had success personally with some of these card games. Absolutely.
I think that's right. The card games that give you a lot of information but are not that strategic are really good. So there's also Pixel Tactics, which I don't think is a great game, but because it just front loads all the information, and it's just, what's your decision now, not what's your decision now that's going to reap rewards in 7 turns time, because they don't do that. Kids generally are much stronger on tactics than strategy. So I think that's a really good tip as well. So I think we've got a few tips. I think we're going to stop it there. And I think if people want more from you, Jason, I want them to comment below and ask what we want Jason to talk about in a further video, and we'll get Tom to okay it and put it on the site, or I'll put it up on Games for Families, which is my own channel. But I'm going to give you one last curveball. If you have a child who's hard to engage for anxiety or trauma reasons, what are your top 3 tips?
A lot of the stuff that we've talked about, so I guess this might be a good summary point. The number one thing is you're building a relationship with a child. You're not healing trauma. The children heal themselves if in the right environment. So I always think of, I say it in my, I'm getting a little feedback. Okay, got it. I always say in my therapy, like, you're not an architect, you're a gardener. And architects fix problems, gardeners create situations where the thing can heal and grow. So when you talk about like treating anxiety and you talk about giving the kid the chance to succeed, all you're doing is being a cool person. All you're doing is creating that safe person, and they'll figure it out. Like, you don't have to tell them, like, be less anxious or let's chill. There's a time and a place for that. I'm not going to denigrate that, but the bigger issue is healing the relationship. So, so that's tip number 1, and that's it's more of an overall approach, and it's kind of healing for the caregiver as well. So I guess this will be like a sub tip is. A lot of times the caregiver has the anxiety themselves because they're not fixing the problem, because they're not getting results that they want. So I work a lot with caregivers to say, you know what, your job isn't to fix. Like my way of saying is your job is not to heal, it's to hold. And then so if you're an effective holder, then try not to be as outcome oriented. Try to just, trust the process, trust that there it will be healing happening. And then the kid might one day decide, okay, I can trust you now, and they'll appear at your bed and all that kind of stuff. So and that kind of it changes a lot for the caregiver themselves. Get the stress off of that, get the guilt off of that, and just focus on that relationship. I mean, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I mean, every tip that I can give is going to be a permutation of that one. So I'm just going to I'll leave you with that one. You are not treating trauma. You are not treating anxiety. You are building relationship, and they heal themselves.
So one tip to rule them all. That's what you're going for.
Exactly.
That sounds good. That's a good phrase. Someone should use that in a hugely successful trilogy of books sometime.
I'm sure you came up with it all by yourself.
I absolutely did. I am literally Tolkien. Anyway, thank you very much, Jason, for all of your contributions. Where can we find you if we want to hear more from you?
See my podcast. I have a weekly podcast on the Dice Tower Network called Every Night is Game Night. We are games on there all the time. Very few times I will kind of do the mental health thing. So I have a couple of episodes on that. You can go check that out. everynightisgamenight.com. If you want to hear more from me in terms of the mental health stuff, you can engage with me via Twitter. Might be the best way. @IanJin_podcast. A lot of folks are talking about mental health stuff. You'd be surprised how open more and more people are opening up and everything. And if you want to hear about some of the different things that I do, I mean, there's anxiety, there's ADHD, there's trauma, there's grief. There's also depression. I'm probably my expertise is depression. So I have all sorts of stuff to say about that. So if you guys want to hear more from me and Max, I mean, I thought this was a lot of fun. Please let us know in the comments. Let us know how long you want the episodes. Let us know how you want to structure the episodes. I mean, I'm having a lot of fun. So as long as Max is willing to have me, I'm willing to come back.
Well, let's see where the whole series goes. But Jason, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time.
So I hope you enjoyed that. Jason is a great guy, a real kind of passionate advocate for mental health and for play, not specifically board games, I think, but for play generally. So I was really excited to talk to him. If you want me to talk to him again and put it out, we might do it on audio or video. Just let us know what you want. The next Great Games for Amazing Children is scheduled to be the last one, so I will probably wait until this goes up and a couple of days before recording it, just so people can tell me the last things that they want to cover. If there's anything you want to cover you feel we haven't covered yet in a video, then do let us know, and I will put it in. I've got some plans I'm going to do about executive function, getting stuff done, organisation, memory, so forth. But anything you want me to add in, I'm very happy to add in. All right, I will see you soon.